it was a joyful evening, which I must confess to struggling in its upper reaches. But sorry. Okay, I want to have a look at the Bible and focus in particular on. In fact, I want to start with Romans chapter 12. Some of you might know that I'm a lawyer by trade, profession, and some will say, yeah, that's pretty obvious. Every word that comes out of your mouth is bigger than it needs to be, and you say more words than we want to hear. So there's all sorts of criticisms that come my way, and for some reason people do recognise that I'm a lawyer. But it's interesting profession in the way it exposes you to people's pursuit of their own justified position relative to others, and how they go about resolving the situation, and the different attitudes that they can bring to bear. So a lot of my work is involved in either understanding the rules in which people are supposed to behave, and therefore either guiding people to do so or slapping people for being naughty, for not doing so, or in other contexts to help people identify what their rights are and either to pursue them or not pursue them, as the case may be. And it's an interesting dynamic that often flows when people are offended by another's actions that undermine that person's perception of their rights. And indeed, that offence to a person either taking something from them, denying them something, or in otherwise conspiring to act or actually acting in a way that is contrary to an agreement that was understood to exist, can lead to some very different and very interesting scenarios as to how we should react. And in Romans chapter 12, it talks about a concept of recompense in verse 17. And in modern English, we might talk about payback as in place of that word. Payback is an interesting concept. And indeed, if you lived in Papua New Guinea or travelled in Papua New Guinea, you would be exposed to some of the less desirable aspects of payback, because payback is often sought on a collective basis, so that even if you individually were not responsible for the offence or the loss of property or the loss of life that had caused others to be upset, that family or that tribe, that they will come not only against you, but against your tribe or clan or however it might be described, and seek payback. And payback is not always measured in dollar terms. It can also be measured with violence against your person. So they will kill you sometimes. And so it can lead to very tough scenarios. And often when you hear about tribal warfare in the highlands of Papua New Guinea, it often links back to a payback type response to a particular offence that is created against an individual, someone's property, or whatever the case may be. And the interesting aspect here, as we read the scriptures, is that it says that we should recompense to no man evil for evil. We should pay back to no one doses of evil in response to the evil that they delivered to us, is in effect what the Apostle Paul is instructing us here. We are, it says here, it goes on to say, provide things honest in the sight of all men. If it be possible, as much as lies in you, live peaceably with all men. Dearly beloved, avenge not yourselves, but rather give place unto wrath, for it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. Therefore, if your enemy hunger, feed him. If he thirst, give him drink. For in so doing you shall heap coals of fire on his head. Be not overcome of evil, but rather, it says here, overcome evil with good. When you read these verses and you recognise the sorts of unjustified actions that can come against you, they can be a bit hard to take. Because at one level it seems to suggest I'm just supposed to take it on the chin when somebody does wrong to me. And indeed that my reaction at all times in those circumstances should be the weaker position, and I should let them run roughshod over me, as some people in this world are prone to do. And there is no doubt that in this world there are some people who seem to say that it's the way that they should behave. And indeed, there are many circumstances in which a just cause for retribution can be identified. And indeed, that occurs not only in a one-to-one sort of family or personal relationship sense, even in a marriage context. It can happen in the workplace, it can happen in an organisation, it can happen in our society generally. Indeed, it can happen at a national or a global level, that people can find a cause to respond with retribution against those who have done me wrong. And we only have to look at the history in the lifetime of at least some of us here over the last century or so, and we can look at the causes of the Second World War and look at the reactions to the First World War, and we can look at various other disputes that have arisen around the world. And we can see people with a so-called just cause used to justify acts of retribution that can often have far-reaching consequences. Indeed, it's interesting in that context to think or reflect on some words of Winston Churchill, which were made shortly after the end of the Second World War. And he told the House of Commons that there is nothing more costly, nothing is more sterile than vengeance, he said. Which is a very interesting context, because of course this is now happening after the war, right? And people are responding to the offences that were so horribly brought against them as a people and as a nation, in trying to formulate the appropriate responses. Now there was an effort, at least in a national and very natural way, to deal with victory in a way that learned from the lessons of the victory that was won post the First World War. There's another fellow, Eric Hopper, he said, retribution often means that we eventually do to ourselves what we have done unto others. And it's very important to understand that there is a action and reaction that is involved in retribution, that is involved in vengeance that people might seek. And indeed, so often life becomes an endless cycle of defining your personal rights, of identifying alleged breaches of those rights, of identifying the perpetrator of such a breach, and of reacting with retribution against the perpetrators. And when you think about it, and this is what underpins the essence of Paul's teaching, I believe, that cycle is misconceived, because it fails to appreciate that so often there is a subjective view, and indeed our own perception comes into play when we define our personal rights, or what is just, or what is fair, or what is reasonable, or what should be the outcome of a particular scenario. And indeed the cycle fails to acknowledge the need to blend together the rights of the parties, and to understand that many of those causes of dispute are not as black and white as we might have first perceived. It also fails to appreciate the longer-term consequences of retribution, which is what Winston Churchill was getting at when he spoke of the consequences of vengeance. And of course, it fails to appreciate, or rather, it often breeds bitterness and hate, and the extent to which we can ultimately in the long term be hurt, even though we might in the short term have achieved some sort of good feeling that flows from an act of retribution. It so often comes back to haunt us. It so often comes back with a renewed vengeance by the one that we were meting out our form of justice on the earlier occasion. And when you think about it, it often prevents us from actually obtaining what we want or what we need, because it becomes self-defeating. It carries with it a cost that you ultimately can't overcome. It is a way of approaching life that seeks to achieve something through short-term action that so often is not able to take into account the full consequence of what it is that we do. And so when the Apostle Paul reminds us here with an instruction that we should not respond to evil with evil, he reminds us where ultimately vengeance lies. And so the scriptural approach here is to tap into the authority and the power of God to ultimately respond with love to the needs of his people as they work and operate in the world, even though they are not of the world. The reality is that the world will slap you around sometimes. There are some people, there are systems, there are circumstances that would come against you and work against you, and in a natural sense would evoke a response of retribution or retaliation. The Bible tells us that is not the response for you, that you have a greater opportunity here to tap into what is at the end of the day able to overcome evil in a much more effective way than our natural forms of retribution or vengeance or retaliation. And indeed, if we ultimately seek to be counted amongst the overcomers in the world, we are told that we should overcome evil with good. And if we can recognise that there is a God and who faithfully underpins those words of instruction that are given to us, then we can start to realise, well, we're actually not victims in this world. We are not ones who are out there who have to be blowing our trumpet or fighting our cause in whatever form, so that we go through this endless cycle of defining and defending our rights. And it's a wonderful freedom to be able to live a life, recognise that it's not all there acting in your favour, but at the end of the day, there is a God in whose hands you are able to rely, and he is there to uphold you. He is there to deal with the circumstances around you. And so these verses are really built on faith. These verses are built upon our willingness to trust the God to deal with the situations that come against us. It doesn't mean that we behave as meek little lambs in all aspects of our life. It doesn't mean that we're not entitled to exercise and to our voice or to speak in pursuit of our cause. But at the end of the day, it helps us understand that we can put it into context, that we can put our own personal scenario in the context of a God who loves us and who sees at the end of the day that he will sort the way through for you. Now, there's some great examples in the Bible of this attitude, and perhaps one of the clearest examples is from David as he was dealt with by King Saul. And we'll pick, I think, a couple of, we will pick a couple of chapters out of 1 Samuel. Go with me to 1 Samuel chapter 24, where we have two snapshots of an interaction between King Saul and David that was part of a long-standing and an ongoing battle as the king, fearful that he'd lost favour with God, fearful that he'd lost the underpinning purpose of his anointing as the king of Israel, fearful about David's status, fearful about where his future ultimately would play out. He responded in a most unjust way against David. And indeed, with his army of 3,000 or so, continually pursued David and turned him into with his band of followers, almost into a band of vagabonds themselves, as they had no firm place to reside, no safe place to reside, as the king pursued David even to death. And so in 1 Samuel 24, let's take this part of the story. It came to pass, we're told in verse 1, when Saul was returned from following the Philistines, that it was told him, saying, David is in the wilderness of En-gedi. And he wasn't told this, by the way, so that he could go and have a forgiveness hug with with him. Right? So this is, it was informed so that he might then pursue him. And Saul took 3,000 chosen men out of all Israel and went to seek David and his men upon the rocks of the wild goats. That's just to emphasize to us that David was forced to flee into the wilderness. He was forced out of his comfortable place previously in the king's residence into this role in his life of having to live from place to place in the wilderness. And he came, it says here, to the sheepcotes on far away, and where was a cave. And Saul went in to cover his feet, and David and his men remained in the sides of the cave. And the men of David said unto him, so you've got the story here, so the king is in the cave. David and his men are secretly aware that the king is there. Right? And so the king is in a position of some vulnerability. And you remember it's almost a war going on here. Right? It's certainly a civil war, and it's a battle between the two men, and ultimately it's a battle for the power of the nation of Israel. This is an opportunity that had arisen for the followers of David and indeed for David himself. So the men of David said in verse 4, they said unto him, behold, the day of which the Lord said unto you, behold, I will deliver your enemy into your hand, that you may do to him as it shall seem good unto you. So in other words, they said, well, what they had found was an easy justification for an act of retribution. Because what they do, they say, this is the Lord's promise in the Bible, or in the Word, that he will deliver your enemies into your hand. Well, have a look at it. There he is there, in the cave, delivered into your hand. What are you going to do about it? Well, the clear implication from David's men was that he should go and kill the king. Right? That's what was implied in all of this. And it was justified because how sweet was this, that the king should be delivered in such a weak state into the hands of David and his men. So there was plenty of justification here. Remember, Saul was unjust in his dealings against David. Right? David had absolute cause to say, now listen, you've been trying to kill me for some time, it's my turn to kill you, right? Because the opportunity is at hand. Right? And so there's a whole case that I'm sure some good lawyer could have run for David, notwithstanding some very strong teaching in the law of God that would have prevented him from killing the king. He could have built up a good case, and most people would have understood. They would have understood. Yeah, we know that he was dealing roughly with him. But what did David do? Well, we're told at the end of that verse 4 that he arose and he cut off the skirt of Saul's robe privily. Right? So he chopped a bit of his pajamas off for his clothes, right? That, well, you know, in the lesson book of acts of retribution, that sounds pretty minor to me. Right? Now David obviously had something in mind here. He was motivated. We're going to see what was motivating him, but also it was significant for him to have acted upon his motivation through this simple act of cutting the garment of King Saul. And it came to pass afterward that David's heart smote him, because he had cut off Saul's skirt. And he said unto his men, the Lord forbid that I should do this thing unto my master. Right? I mean, his men are probably saying, come on, fella, right? That's pretty minor what you did. You could have chopped his ear off, and that would have been justified. And all you've done is chopped a bit of his garment. But David is berating himself for even doing that, because he recognises that the king was the Lord's anointed, and that for him to stretch forth his hand against him, and seeing that he is the anointed of the Lord, was something worthy of criticism. And so David respected the king and the authority that the Lord had given him. And he recognised that even this simple act of chopping the garment was, well, to put it mildly, a bit cheeky and certainly disrespectful against the king. So David stopped his servants with these words, and he suffered them not to rise against Saul. But Saul rose up out of the cave and went on his way. Right? Presumably, he hadn't noticed that his garment had been cut. And David also arose after him and went out of the cave, and he cried after Saul, saying, my lord the king. And when Saul looked behind him, David stooped with his face to the earth and bowed himself. And David said to Saul, wherefore hearest thou men's words, saying, behold, David seeks your hurt? Behold, this day your eyes have seen how the Lord has delivered you today into my hand in the cave. And some bade me kill you, but mine eyes spared you. And I said, I will not put forth my hand against my Lord, for he is the Lord's anointed. Moreover, my father, see the skirt of your robe in my hand, for in that I cut off the skirt of your robe and killed you not. Know you and see that there is neither evil nor transgression in my hand, and I have not sinned against you, and yet you hunt my soul to take it. Right, so David puts forward a pretty good plea here. I didn't need a lawyer, and he was able to present to the king his case for the king to just back off. And he emphasised here that those who had fed the king's fears and talked about David as being one out to kill the king had been proved wrong. Because David, despite the advice he received from his own men, refused to take the opportunity to put vengeance in his own hand and slay the king. And so he brings that to the king's clear attention. And then it continues in verse 12, that the Lord judge between me and you, says David, and the Lord avenge me of you, but my hand shall not be upon you. As says the prophet of the ancients, wickedness proceeds from the wicked, but my hand shall not be upon you. It's a bit like, recompense not evil with evil. Here David says, wickedness proceeds from the wicked. Right? And so an evil response is born of an evil nature, and wickedness is born of a wicked nature, says David. And so therefore that response to the injustice that is brought against David is not justified, according to David's understanding of the teaching. He has no justification to bring vengeance into his own hand and to respond to the king in this way, despite the fact that others may see it differently. And so he goes on in verse 16, it says, and it came to pass when David had made an end of speaking these words unto Saul, that Saul said, is this your voice, my son David? And Saul lifted up his voice and wept. And he said to David, you are more righteous than I, for that you have rewarded me good, whereas I have rewarded you evil. Right? He has recompensed evil with good, not recompensed evil with evil, is what Saul can recognise here. And you have showed this day how that you have dealt well with me. For as much as when the Lord had delivered me into your hand, you didn't kill me. For if a man find his enemy, will he let him go well away? Wherefore the Lord reward you good, for that you have done unto me this day. And now, behold, I know well that you shall surely be king, and that the kingdom of Israel shall be established in your hand. Swear now therefore unto me by the Lord that you will not cut off my seed after me, and that you will not destroy my name out of my father's house. And David sware unto Saul. Saul went home, but David and his men gat them up unto the hold, or unto the stronghold. Right? So David didn't believe Saul, is the bottom line. Right? So even though David had withheld his hand when vengeance, some would have said, was called for, or certainly justified, and for the reasons we've already noted, he decided that was not the way to act. And even though he pleaded that case to Saul strongly, and even though Saul appeared to understand it and to recognise it and look to a future without himself being the continuing position as the king, David had his doubts. And he didn't just pack up and go back to his old home. He went with his men to the stronghold. Because there continued to be a divide between them. We're not going to read the next chapter. It's a wonderful chapter there that talks about the story of David and Abigail and Nabal. Wonderful story there, and the lessons of a foolish man as he failed to receive and understand David's position, and and the great blessing that followed not only for David, but for Abigail and the generations that would follow. So that's in chapter 25. But let's pick it up in chapter 26, if we may, because that brings us back to the direct story and interactions between Saul and David. And it says that the Ziphites came unto Saul to Gibeah, saying, "Does not David hide himself in the hill of Hachilah, which is before Jeshimon?" Right now, this is very similar to the way chapter 24 started. Right, somebody told Saul where David was, and again they are trying to flush him out and ultimately bring him hurt. And so Saul arose and went down to the wilderness of Ziph, having 3,000 chosen men of Israel with him. You remember he had 3,000 chosen men with him on the first occasion, who somehow left him vulnerable in the cave. But anyway, he's out there to battle and to seek David in the wilderness of Ziph. And Saul pitched his tents in the hill of Hachilah, which is before Jeshimon, by the way. But David abode in the wilderness, and he saw that Saul came after him into the wilderness. David therefore sent out spies and understood that Saul was coming very deep. Oh, that's old English. In other words, he knew why Saul was there. He was pursuing a particular deed, a particular action, and it wasn't a friendly one. Right? And that was clear, and the spies confirmed that. And David arose and came to the place where Saul had pitched. And David beheld the place where Saul lay. And Abner, the son of Ner, the captain of his host, and Saul lay in the trench. And the people pitched around about him. And then answered David and said to Ahimelech the Hittite, and to Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, brother to Joab, saying, "Who will go down with me to Saul to the camp?" And Abishai said, "I will go down with you." Now, I bet you Abishai didn't think that they were going to shake hands with Saul, but nevertheless, he went down there to accompany David. And David and Abishai came to the people by night, and behold, Saul lay sleeping within the trench, and his spear stuck in the ground at his bolster. But Abner and the people lay round about him. Then said Abishai to David, "God has delivered your enemy into your hand this day." Again, he characterized the scenario as one where God had delivered his enemy into David's hands. What do you do when the enemy is handed to you on a plate? You pick up his spear that's just lying next to him, and you deliver justice, right? Is the implication on the part of Abishai. And in fact, to here, he says, "Why don't you let me do it? Right? If you've got a problem doing it yourself, let me do it. I pray thee with the spear even to the earth at once, and I will not smite him the second time." And David said to Abishai, "Destroy him not. For who can stretch forth his hand against the Lord's anointed and be guiltless?" So there was this overriding principle that again influences David's reaction. And he says, "Look, notwithstanding what case I might give to support you picking up that spear and delivering justice, if you do so, we will not be guiltless. And it'll come back against us in the longer term." And so he goes on, he says, and David said furthermore, "As the Lord lives, the Lord shall smite him, or his day shall come to die, or he shall descend into battle and perish. The Lord forbid that I should stretch forth my hand against the Lord's anointed. But I pray thee, take thou now the spear that is at his bolster and the cruse of water, and let us go." So David took the spear and the cruse of water from Saul's bolster, and they gat them away. And no man saw it, nor knew it, neither awaked, for they were all asleep, great guards, weren't they? And because a deep sleep from the Lord was fallen upon them. So the Lord was intervening in his sleep. Then David went over to the other side and stood on the top of an hill afar off, a great space being between them. Right? And so he separated himself, but had taken the spear and the cruse of water. We might skip the next few verses, pick it up in verse 17. We're told that Saul knew David's voice and said, "Is this your voice, my son David?" And David said, "It is my voice, my lord, O king." And he said, "Wherefore does my lord thus pursue after his servant?" Right? This is David again crying out to his king. "For what have I done? For what evil is in my hand? Now therefore I pray you, let my lord the king hear the words of his servant. If the Lord has stirred you up against me, let him accept an offering. But if they be the children of men, cursed be they before the Lord, for they have driven me out this day from abiding in the inheritance of the Lord, saying, Go, serve other gods. Now therefore let not my blood fall to the earth before the face of the Lord. For the king of Israel is come out to seek a flea, and when one does hunt a partridge in the mountains. Then said Saul, I have sinned. And we've heard this before. Return, my son David, for I will no more do you harm, because my soul was precious in your eyes this day. Behold, I've played the fool, and I've erred exceedingly. And David answered and said, Behold the king's spear, and let one of the young men come over and fetch it. And the Lord rendered to every man his righteousness and his faithfulness, for the Lord delivered you into my hand today. But I would not stretch forth my hand against the Lord's anointed. And behold, as your life was much set by this day in mine eyes, so let my life be much set by in the eyes of the Lord. And let him deliver me out of all tribulation. And then Saul said to David, Blessed be thou, my son of David. You shall both do great things, and also shall still prevail. So David went on his way, and Saul returned to his place. The reality is they were still not reconciled. And this was part of the challenge. And if you read the next few chapters to the end of 1 Samuel, you'll see, Paul confused Saul. He talks to witches. He gets himself in a real bind. David himself does some curious decisions as he ties himself to the Philistines and others, and tries to grapple with the challenges that the king's unjust behaviour has come against him. But he refuses steadfastly, as we saw in these two little scenarios here, to personally bring that vengeance against King Saul. King Saul ultimately died, and the throne, as we well know, came to David, even as was expected. But the important and interesting part of the story in the context of the direction that we started with today in Romans chapter 12 is there was a way to achieve that. And the way was not to define, or for David to define, just terms for him to bring vengeance against Saul. And indeed, he was a living example of the instruction that the Apostle Paul was giving us in Romans chapter 12. Let's put it into the New Testament context and look at some of the directions that Jesus gave us on this. Have a look at Matthew chapter 7. As a lawyer, you make a good living out of people who just want to do it for the principle. Right? You make a good living for people who define a dispute because it's the principle that offends me. I'm not interested in the money, they say. I'm only interested in the principle. Right? And if you hear that as a lawyer, you say, well, I'm going to be in a job for a little while to come. Right? And because this self-defined, subjective definition of the relevant principle ultimately is going to often lead that person to shoot themselves in the foot, to use a well-known proverb. And it is something that you can observe so often when it happens. And I remember when I used to be a barrister, I, on a number of occasions, counselled people against their perception of the principle and suggested there may have been an alternative way to deal with their grievance. Because, well, I haven't seen too many people win in those circumstances, and there's plenty of losses that can be achieved. But here, in Matthew chapter 7, Jesus brings it home in a much more direct way. And he moves here from the action of vengeance back to the motivator. Right? And he's talking about judgment. Right? He's talking about forming a conclusion, of condemning someone else, of determining that a particular state of affairs warrants some action. And his instruction here is not to do it. He says, judge not, that ye be not judged. For with what judgment do you judge, you shall be judged. Oh, sorry, I'll go back one step. For with what judgment you judge, you shall be judged. And with what measure you meet, it shall be measured to you again. The implication is that the flawed judgment that you exercise, that you're proposing to motivate or justify some actions against another through an act of vengeance will ultimately be the same judgment that comes back to you with all of its flaws that underpin your own actions. Why do you behold the mote that is in your brother's eye, but consider not the beam that is in your own eye? Motes and beams seem a funny sort of old English way to describe it. But in essence, he says, you're all picking out the little fly in somebody else's eye, and but in your own, there's this big issue for you to deal with. And we are so good at finding fault in others. It's incredible. In a marriage context, you see it quite often. This incredible ability to focus on the minutiae, and get incredibly worked up over it. There is so much that can cause friction and warrant some justified retribution in the context of a personal relationship as close as a marriage. And you see it. And the encouragement here, in fact, I think it's an instruction, is that we don't do it. And that we recognise that as we go about in our natural reactions to the one on the other side, is we're better off focusing what's in our own mind. And let's get that out first. Oh, how would you say to your brother, let me pull out the mote of your eye, and behold, the beam is in your own eye? You're a hypocrite, he says. First cast out the beam out of your own eye, and then shall you see clearly to cast out the mote out of your brother's eye. Doesn't mean to say there isn't something to be removed from the brother's eye. Jesus acknowledges that there is, but he says you've got to deal with yourself and ultimately let it play out. And don't go focusing on that. Give not that which is holy unto the dogs, neither cast you your pearls before swine, lest they trample them under their feet and turn again and rend you. Ask, and it shall be given you. Seek, and you shall find. Knock, and it shall be opened unto you. For everyone that asks receives, and he that seeks finds. And to him that knocks it shall be opened. For what man is there of you, whom if his son asks bread, will he give him a stone? Or if he asks a fish, will he give him a serpent? If you then, being evil, know how to give good gifts unto your children, how much more shall your Father, which is in heaven, give good things to them that ask him? Therefore, he says in verse 12, all things whatsoever you would that men should do to you, do you even so to them. For this is the law and the prophets. Now, I reckon that's really interesting, right? Because in this set of verses here, we started off there in verse 1 with an instruction not to judge and the reason why we should not. And then when we got to verse 7, it seems to change direction. And indeed, there it's talking about the need that we have to ask, to seek, and to knock, and speaks of the wonderful opportunity that the Lord gives to us, because as we ask, it will be given to us, and as we seek, we will find, and as we knock, the door will be open. And then he talks about gifts, clearly speaking about the gifts that God makes available to his people. He speaks of God giving good gifts to those that ask him. Now, that little interlude is then brought back in verse 12 to the previous topic, because he's saying here, and he's reminding us that in the context of God being the giver of those things that we need, God being the one to provide our need, if we would but turn to him, then that should influence the way that we react to the injustices that we think people are bringing against us. And indeed, the way we react to them should be, it says here, for all things whatsoever you would that men do to you, you should be doing to them. And that is the underpinning aspect that allows us to do that, is because we can have a faith that there is a God who will provide what we need. He will give us the good gifts. He will respond to our asking and our seeking and our knocking, and he will deliver for us. And so we do not need to judge. We do not need to focus on the mote in the other eye, but rather we can focus more on what it is that the Lord promises to deliver for us. Have a look in Romans chapter 15, and there's a few verses similar. It says in Romans 15 and verse 1, "We then that are strong ought to bear the infirmities of the weak, and not to please ourselves. Let every one of us please his neighbour for his good to edification. For even Christ pleased not himself, but, as it is written, the reproaches of them that reproached thee fell on me." Life is not about defining what we deserve and then fighting to get it. That is not the life that we are called to live. This is not about rights-based in that context behaviour in our world. Rather, there's a broader opportunity that God makes available to us. And so he urges us here to please our neighbour for his good to edification. So we ought to build up our neighbour, it says here. Because, he reminds us, Christ did not please himself. It was no enjoyable situation that Christ put himself into as the sacrifice for us all. And he took upon himself the reproaches of all that says there. For whatsoever things were written aforetime in verse 4 were written for our learning, that we through patience and comfort of the scriptures might have hope. What's hope about? Hope's about the future. Right? Why do we think we need to react to the unjust actions against us? Because we look for a better future, and maybe we want to deal with the past in the process. Right? We have a hope, it says here, that is built upon our reaction to the promises, our patience, and the comfort of the scriptures that are given to us, so that we might have hope. Now, the God of patience and consolation grant you to be like-minded one toward another, according to Christ Jesus, that you may with one mind and one mouth glorify God, even the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. Wherefore receive you one another, as Christ also received us to the glory of God. Now this is, of course, very much speaking and focused here upon our relationship together, upon each other as our neighbour, as we build each other up, and how we have an opportunity to ensure that as we react to each other, it doesn't need to be with division and the pursuit of our own self and what it is that we seek by our own assessment, but rather it's about building each other up. Finally, let's go to Hebrews and chapter 12. So in Hebrews chapter 12 and reading from verse, I think I've got the number in here. I think it's verse 12. Wherefore lift up the hands. Hebrews 12:12. Yes. Wherefore lift up the hands which hang down and the feeble knees, and make straight paths for your feet, lest that which is lame be turned out of the way, but let it rather be healed. Follow peace with all men, and holiness, without which no man shall see the Lord. Looking diligently, lest any man fail of the grace of God, lest any root of bitterness springing up trouble you, and thereby many be defiled. Now, when it talks about lifting up hands which hang down and the feeble knees, it's saying be active and strong, right? Be going about diligent in your life. And here it really focuses upon how we link that attitude to having peace with all men, so that we can look diligently, as it says there, lest any root of bitterness spring up, trouble you, and thereby many be defiled. It's really important in our relationship with each other that we don't allow those roots of bitterness to develop, that we deal with a situation in a spiritual way, and not according to what the world might teach us as to what we deserve. Because ultimately, vengeance is the Lord, and He is the Lord's, and He is the one, through His wisdom and His love, who will ultimately guide us and comfort us through the situation. We are urged to build each other up, to edify one another, and allow ourselves to be strengthened in that way collectively so that we can meet the challenge of this world and trust in what it is that God has for us.